so it's time for another Halacha talk. Do you have a few minutes?
Sure, let's do it.
The next Melacha in line is Lash, kneading, which the basic Melacha is about taking flour and mixing it with water and making the dough, making the batter. But more applicable for today and what we'll discuss is things like making egg salad, tuna salad, and things like that. So let's start from the basics. What are the basics of the Melacha of Lash?
As you said, the Av Melacha is to take flour and to make it into dough. And what you're doing, if you really break that down, is that you're taking the little particles of flour, combining it with water to make it into one mass. That's what's happening when you do it. And so that leads to a lot of questions, as you mentioned, egg salad, tuna salad, oatmeal, baby cereals, all kinds of situations where you're taking little pieces and putting them together into one big piece. Another question that I grew up with is my father always liked eating sour cream and bananas together. So is that a problem? You take the piece of banana, you put it together with the cream. Is that a problem with the Melacha of Lash? Now, we'll get back to defining to which particles Lash applies. But to start with what you use to mix it, the poskim note that it doesn't have to be water. It's any liquid that combines things together that would be considered Lash potentially. And that's even thicker substances like oil and honey. Contemporary poskim note the common application today would be taking mayonnaise, because that's a substance that can bind together many small pieces. And again, we'll discuss exactly to what it applies, but the point here is that it's not only water, it's all of these substances as well. Now, to understand Melacha's Lash, we have to think about this for a second. There are two steps that happen when you knead flour and water together. Number one, you have to put the water into the flour. That's the nesinas mayim. And number two, if you ever baked bread, you know, you have to knead. You have to do what's called the gibul in the Gmara to mix the flour and the water together. Now, the question is, at which step is there a Melacha min Torah taking place? So there's actually a Machloket Tana'im about this in the Gmara. According to one opinion, it's only when you do the kneading that you're in violation of the Melacha. However, the other opinion is that even by pouring in the water, you've also violated the Melacha of Lash at that stage. Now, everyone agrees you're not allowed to pour in the water because that's part of the process, and that would be an MiDerabanan, as we've talked about in the past. And anything that's close to a Melacha, that's on our way to a Melacha, is very often going to be prohibited MiDerabanan. Nevertheless, as we're going to see in the Melacha of Lash, it's very important to know whether we're dealing with a Torah violation or a Derabanan violation. There can be very big implications. So in this context, it's very important that there's a Machloket whether pouring of the water is only MiDerabanan or is actually part of the Torah violation of the Melacha of Lash. Of course, everyone agrees that the full process of mixing in water and kneading it together, that is the Melacha min Torah. How do we paskin? The Shulchan Aruch quotes both opinions, and he implies that we paskin like most Rishonim, that we only have to be concerned with the kneading. However, the major Ashkenazi poskim, including the Chai Adam and the Mishnah Berurah, they paskin that one should be machmir unless it's a big need, a big shas adachak, as we'll see. But generally, we should treat even the mixing of the water as part of the Melacha, and we have to be concerned that that's min Torah. What this means is that it's not going to be so easy to be lenient on mixing in the water and putting things together, as we're going to discuss. Whereas for the Shulchan Aruch and for Sfardim, who seem to paskin that the mixing of the water is not such a problem, we're going to have some more openings to do this. But again, we'll get back to those details soon. Now, the logic for this opinion, which is the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, that even pouring in the water is a problem, is that even in the initial pour, there's some mixing that's happening, and therefore it's already considered the Melacha of Lash. The poskim note that if we're pouring in something thicker, like the honey or mayonnaise, we said as a common example, there nothing takes place until you physically mix it. So while water, it could be a problem to just pour, with the other thicker substances, it's not a problem to pour, and it will only be a problem to mix things together. And therefore, even if mixing something with mayonnaise is a problem, just to put the mayonnaise on top of your food, that would certainly not be a problem because you haven't actively mixed it in.
Okay, so if there's an issue with just adding the water, is there a difference between adding a lot of water, adding a little water, or how thick the batter is?
Good question. So the Gemara distinguishes between a belila ava and a belila raka, a thick batter and a thin batter. The Achronim assume, based on the Gemara, that prohibition min Torah is only going to be in a thick mixture, whereas a thin mixture will only be MiDerabanan. Now, that still means you can't permit it outright, but again, as we mentioned, we will have more room to be lenient. We get to the practical examples as the belila raka with a thin batter. What are some common examples? If you're dealing with dough for bread, that is a very thick batter, whereas if you're dealing with something that's pourable, you have like applesauce or a batter for like a cake or something that pours, that would be considered a belila raka and would not be Lash min Torah to make that combination. The poskim note that even a belila raka has to have some substance to it. So if something gets mixed in but it's still completely a liquid, then that would be permitted. And it's based on this that the poskim say there's no issue at all with mixing in baby formula, let's say with water, or hot chocolate with water, or drink mix, all of those things, they mix into the water and dissolve, and it still remains a complete liquid, and therefore that is not included in the Melacha of Lash at all. But when we're talking about some more of a mixture that has some substance to it, it would be potentially a problem. However, to be a problem in Torah, which, as we've noted, is going to be more problematic, that has to be a thick mixture like dough that is not pourable. Now, moving into the question of what items, what particles would be included in the Melacha of Lash, the Mishnah Berurah notes that it only applies to very finely cut foods. The original Melacha of Lash, as we've said, is taking those particles of flour and mixing it together. How about bigger pieces? So the Mishnah Berurah distinguishes between very thinly cut fruits and vegetables that actually get stuck together when they're with the water, than bigger pieces that still stand alone. The example that the Mishnah Berurah gives lahachmer is a cucumber salad. You've seen a cucumber salad, so they're very thinly cut pieces of cucumber, and the cucumber salad looks like one big glob. That's where it's potentially a problem, and the Mishnah Berurah says one should be careful not to do that. However, if they're thicker pieces that really stand alone, like the example I mentioned earlier, my father's bananas and sour cream, where the pieces are very clearly distinguishable, then it's not a problem. The Mishnah Berurah talks about making salad. If you cut up lettuce and you make a salad, just because you put in some liquid dressing doesn't lump it all together into one. It still stands separately, and therefore it would be okay. So those are the principles. Again, there are two steps in the process. There's the pouring of the water or the liquid and combining it with the particles, and also the active physical mixing, those two steps. And there are also two types of mixtures, the thick dough-like mixture and the thin batter-like mixture. That would be a distinction with the thick one being deraisa, the thin one being MiDerabanan. And now we have to discuss is, when is it permissible to make these mixtures? And in what way is it permissible? And one of the very interesting things about the Melacha of Lash is that we find that shinui, that doing something in an unusual manner, usually that doesn't permit something outright. It only lowers it from being a problem in Torah to MiDerabanan. So for example, if you would turn on a light with your elbow, that's an unusual way to turn on a light. That's not a Torah violation. It's still prohibited MiDerabanan. Okay, if you're in a situation where someone's sick or you're in a hospital and you need to do it, so it's better to do it with a shinui, but it doesn't usually permit things outright. In the Melacha of Lash, sometimes shinui does permit it outright. Next week we'll have to get into practically how to do it. How can you make your baby cereal? How can you make your tuna salad and egg salad? And we'll get into those details.
Okay, so I guess we'll have to wait with egg salad and tuna salad until next week. So for this week, we'll just stick to the filter dish.
Don't make it on Shabbos.
Right, great. Shkoyer.
All right, my pleasure. It was great talking to you, Tuvia.
We'll continue to talk next week.
For more short and fast-paced Talking Torah clips, make sure to check out our YouTube channel.